Welcome to Healthcare Triage Live. Hopefully all of this is working. We're trying out lots of new technology all at the same time, and we've only done this a few times. So this is when we try to attempt to answer some of our viewers' questions. Please either tweet them or even better, put them in the comments right down below. And we'll try to get to as many as possible while we're doing this today. Let's start right off the bat with Jay Van der Linden, who asks, is there any proven benefit to meditation? So whenever you get questions like that, the key is what do you mean by proven benefit? Because yes, there are some proven benefits, just not often the ones that people think that there really are. So there have been good trials that can show that the use of meditation perhaps can lead to, better feelings, less perhaps depression or sadness, that they can make you feel better, that they can even improve quality of life and certainly mental quality of life. And so there's lots of good things that show that people that will actively engage in meditation can receive some benefit. Where it goes off the rails a little bit is when people start talking about it that it's curing cancer or reducing diabetes or things like that. Because obviously quality of life and mental health are related to those things and in terms of people's quality of life, but it doesn't provide any kind of sort of proven physical benefit in the way that people are often selling it. So if somebody had cancer and they wanted to use meditation because it improved their peace of mind or their quality of life while they have cancer, that's awesome. If they think it's because they're going to get a medical cure from it, that is not proven. And that is when people are sort of going off. So are there proven benefits? Sure. Just unfortunately not the ones that people are often pushing towards. Next question comes from Trees of the Field. Oh, nope, now they're all over the place. So let's go Trees of the Field, who asks, what is colloidal silver? Is it safe? Is it effective? It's a form of silver, I believe, that people take. I'm just going to go with no. Effective for what? Again, it's almost the same question as the first one. Effective for what? Curing cancer? No. In this case, I don't even know that there have been any good studies that show that it's effective for anything. I could be wrong. There could be like a study somewhere that does, and if I am wrong, I encourage you to tweet me, and I'll be sure to look this up later. But I'm going to go with no. I don't know of any really good proven benefits for colloidal silver. And safe is, of course, when something is, we've had so many problems where things aren't well regulated when they're not considered drugs that you don't even know what you're getting. It is not something that I would be recommending that any of my patients would take, any of my friends or family would take, and probably not something I'd recommend that you take. If your doctor disagrees with me, have a good discussion with him or her. But we'll go with a no on this one. Next question comes to us from somebody. Oh, okay. I can't see who it's from, but the question is it possible to be asymptomatic and still pass on herpes? Yeah. The answer would be yes, because even like in the very early stages when I think you're not quite there, it is, herpes is incredibly infectious. Herpes is one of those things that even good use of a condom doesn't totally protect you against, because lesions can be outside the condom. And you could have a lesion and not even realize it. They don't have to be totally painful. They don't have to be really ugly. And so it is possible. Having said that, it's so common that it's almost impossible to protect against completely. It's one of the reasons why the vaccine is so good. If we can prevent people from getting herpes in the first place, we don't have to worry about all of this. So trying to prevent the infection through vaccination in the first place would be a much better way to go than to try to constantly monitor yourself and be at least risk. Now, of course, it is possible to have herpes internally and not be passing it along. It does happen, but you don't want to think like you're 100% protected against passing it on just because you don't notice a lesion or because you don't think one is there. Charlie Tuba asks, when should people get bone density tests? How about a man over 55? I don't actually know that there are any recommendations for bone density tests across the board for anyone asymptomatically. Now, I could be wrong in that. There could be a USPSTF guideline, I know, but they just recently came out and said, as we've covered, that we shouldn't be doing universal vitamin D screening. And without universal vitamin D screening, it's hard to imagine we go way steps further and do universal bone screening. So probably, I imagine, you'd do a bone density test when your physician is actively concerned that there's some problem with your bone density because of symptoms or because of fractures or because of something else. But as for just saying, hey, when are you going to get a bone density test? Like, hey, when are you going to start getting your colonoscopies? I don't think that there's really any guidelines that say we should be doing that at all. A voicin asks, we'll probably be able to test for every genetically linked disease in the future. Should we? Well, I'm going to dispute that. I don't know that we're going to be able to test for every genetically linked disease in the future. Part of the problem is that, with very few exceptions, genes don't say you're going to get a disease or you're not. There are some exceptions, Huntington's, chorea, things like that. But most of the time it's like, well, you're going to be at higher risk or you're going to be at lower risk. And there are many other factors which are going to come into play. And in that case, that's a better thing of like, should we be testing it? The truth of the matter is that you should only really be testing for genetic diseases if the knowledge is going to help you, where you can do something about it, and when getting the knowledge super early is even better than getting the knowledge later. Unfortunately, for so many of the genetic tests that we have, there aren't many things you can do. Obviously there are exceptions. Knowing a BRCA mutation is going to make your decision about what to do about your breast cancer perhaps more informed. But there are many diseases without cures where, finding out that you have them can only provide you with angst, or I shouldn't say have them, but having a high risk can only provide you with angst, because what are you going to do? Sometimes it's worth knowing if it's going to impact whether or not you want to have kids, or whether or not you think that they would be at risk and how it's going to happen. But they're only when you can actually do something about it is it worth having new medical knowledge. And lots of times there just isn't. And so, if somebody told me today I was at high risk for a disease that I might get in my 60s, but there was absolutely nothing I could do about it right now, all that knowledge could do is ruin my quality of life right now, because it would make me start panicking about it. So I'd rather not know. And for people that say, well, I'd rather always know, I'm not sure you really thought that through. If there's truly nothing you can do about it, I don't know why sort of having that knowledge way in advance would be terribly useful. You should live every day, live your life to the fullest right now regardless. Knowing something bad could happen in the future that you can't predict shouldn't change how you do that. James Sasek asks, how was P90X? Well, it was P90X3. I did P90X 5 or 6 years ago, and that is, that was harder in so many ways. The workouts were like 60 to 90 minutes total. That yoga workout was like 90 freaking minutes, and it was a beast. That was too much time. P90X3, far superior. 30-minute workouts, really, really much, much better. I actually enjoyed it. I finished it recently, and so I'm restarting it now, although I doubt I'll commit to the everyday intensity and never skipping one as I tried to do for the 90 days. I got results in the sense that I probably lost like 14 or 15 pounds. I mean, part of that was diet, don't get me wrong. A lot of that was diet. And I think I saw some changes to my body that at least my wife noticed. But I certainly don't look like the guys in the ads. So I don't think don't believe the infomercial. You're not going to be ripped and six-pack in 90 days unless, I don't know, maybe you will be. I was not. I don't think most people would. I did enjoy it, I think, overall, and it's the kind of thing I think I'd stick with. The repetition was nice. The changes were nice. I felt like I was getting an active workout, was sweating, was working my muscles. Sometimes the videos can get a little annoying, but I still enjoyed it overall. So I'm not telling you it's great for everybody, because I try never to endorse exercise or diets, because as we've talked about many times, the best thing that's going to work is the one that works for you. The best exercise routine is the one you're going to stick to. I liked it. I stuck to it for 90 days, and I think I'll likely stick to it for more. That was fantastic. If that's the kind of thing that works for you, by all means, try it. So I give it a thumbs up for me overall. Troy R. asks, diabetes runs in my family. What are some strategies to reduce my likelihood of developing it? So it sort of depends if you're talking about type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, take good care of yourself, try to remain fit, but it's a little harder to avoid that. Type 2 diabetes, there are good trials like the Diabetes Prevention Program, which ironically enough, a lot of the research was done here at Indiana University, which show that lifestyle modifications like exercising more and watching your diet and losing weight are quite effective in reducing your chance of getting diabetes if you're at risk. We've been doing a lot of research to try to expand the diabetes prevention program to kids and to families and things like that. So, it's the same kind of advice you get from anybody. Exercise and diet. Try to be healthy, be active, watch what you eat. Don't be obese, don't be overweight. Those are the best things that you can do to avoid getting diabetes, and they work. J. Min D. Kim asks, is lucid dreaming even possible? Well, haven't you ever, possible? I'm going to say yes. Have you never had a dream where you finally figured out you're dreaming and able to establish some sort of control over it? It happened, ironically, it happened to me this week. I dreamed I was the president and I was about to go to a state dinner, and we were going up to the White House, and I took a weird route on purpose because I thought it would let me see more of the White House. God knows what I was seeing. But as for people who can actively and regularly control their dreams, that's pretty anecdotal, and I'm not sure. How much people can actually train to do that. But I do think that some people can become aware that they are dreaming and therefore have more control over actively manipulating it than they otherwise would be able to. I hope that answers your question. Ryan says that last time I said chiropractic care was a placebo, what back pain treatments do you recommend? It's ironic. I actually did some research recently where my center actually looked into what are the best treatments out there for back pain, and we tried to look at all the available evidence because people have chronic back pain that's not well managed, and there have been a lot of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So, what doesn't work well? Turns out that surgeries don't work so well, or they work, but they don't work better than placebo, which is the real problem. Because remember, surgical placebos exist. There's lots of other therapies that are much more experimental. There's blanking. People will try the magnetism stuff. I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that. People will try a lot of the applying sort of electrical current. The evidence is on that. When you compare it to placebo, sometimes you get a tiny little effect, but it's not great. And then there's that therapy, and it's blanking on me right now. It's it's not cryotherapy. It's it's going to come to me while I'm talking to you. But it's where they inject some sort of caustic agent into the back, and it actually winds up causing inflammation and then healing. There aren't great trials for that, but there are some trials, some studies which show that in some limited senses it might have some benefit. The question is always, does any of this have any benefit other than pain medication and physical therapy? And almost nothing does. Physical therapy and pain medication are often the best that we can do. And when you're thinking about those other things, always what you should be thinking about are what are the risks and what are the benefits, which we always talk about. The problem is that with the back surgery, the risks are quite severe. I know lots of people who have had back surgery and then have had reasonably serious complications. When you're talking about, the magnetism, really no side effects at all. When you're talking about the therapy that I cannot place, the something therapy where they inject stuff into your back, some minor side effects, but they are real. Same thing goes with some of the electrical stimulation. So, and they have costs. They have real costs because a lot of times those are not things that are covered by insurance, and so you're paying for them out of pocket. So, unfortunately, for the vast majority of friends that I know who have back pain, usually I recommend physical therapy and pain medication for as long as possible, and trying to strengthen your back and trying to do as much as you can to relieve it. Because a lot of the more intensive therapies, it's very hard to argue that the benefits outweigh the harms or the potential harms. Thomas Beard asks, have you looked at recent research suggesting milk fat has some protective effect against obesity and heart disease? I feel like you're trolling me, dude. Really? Yeah, okay, so I have not seen a lot of research showing that milk fat is protective. I'm assuming you're actually saying that people are skimming off the fat and taking that alone, because as I've talked about before, the most recent studies looking at the explanations for, you're sort of trying to look at the relationship between milk and health have shown that high milk intake is actually detrimental. And in fact, a lot of the pathways that the basic scientists are talking about that it's bad for heart. It's bad for your cardiovascular, health, that it might have some kind of damage. And so given that the recent evidence is showing us that there's no benefit to milk. I can't believe you're making me do this again. No benefit to milk and potential harm. I'm having a hard time imagining that they're arguing that the milk fat is somehow also beneficial for heart health when the milk itself is possibly detrimental to heart health. So I'm going to go with no. I don't think that's possible. A voicin asks, is there a medical explanation for Hank's new haircut? I don't believe there's any explanation for Hank's new haircut. I'm not going to get into it as much as John did, obviously. I don't know Hank that well in order to say what it is. I imagine Hank liked it, or someone Hank cares for liked it, and that's the explanation for Hank's new haircut, but no medical explanation at all. All right, we're stuck, so I'm gonna stretch the, woo! Okay, I'm gonna take a pause for a second and take a drink of water from this well product placed mug, which are all still available, along with the posters. We'd really like you to get some to help support the show and things like that. So, feel free to buy one and, go with that. All right, here's a new question. Grace M asks, I've had a few family members with epilepsy, including my father. Does that put me at risk? I do believe that, and this is a great question. It's the kind of thing that comes up with almost every disease, where people are worried about, is it genetic, meaning, or does it run in families? And a lot of things do. And part of this depends really sort of on what kind of epilepsy it is and some other factors. But I think generally and broadly, having family members with epilepsy, the fact that you've had a few family members with epilepsy should answer your question. It's running in the family. The likelihood by chance of a few family members getting epilepsy, which isn't that common, is pretty low unless the disease runs in families. And evidence like, oh my God, it's running in families, is the kind of thing which helps us tell there probably is some sort of genetic or familial component. So, the answer is probably yes. You probably do have a slightly higher risk of you having epilepsy. The questions that I would ask as your physician, and I'm not your physician, would be things like, well, when did they develop epilepsy? Was it when they were children? Was it when they were older? That might help decide if you're over the risk or not. Going back to a really early question, it's not like we have great genetic tests, like that's the epilepsy gene or that's the test. Lots of things probably contribute to epilepsy. And I don't think we have a test yet to tell you if you're at risk or not. So it's the kind of thing where it's like, probably there is an increased risk greater than 0 that you probably do have epilepsy. This is not medical advice. You should talk to your doctor. But it would be very hard to quantify that or to say for sure. Tarek Madani, does red meat increase cancer risk? Tarek, I wrote a piece about this in the New York Times just a couple weeks ago. I really encourage you to go read it. It was probably one of the most popular ones other than marijuana versus pot. I'd say that was the most popular piece I've ever written at the New York Times. We were trying to actually get at whether red meat is really the devil, or at least that's what I was trying to get at. Whether it's really the problem that people have made it out to be. And a lot of the evidence for showing why red meat is really problematic, the evidence is somewhat flawed. It's all epidemiologic, and as we've talked about many times, association is not causation. Oftentimes people that eat red meat or eat tons of red meat have lots of other risk factors which put them at increased risk for cancer. Plus, even in the epidemiologic studies, the amount of red meat you need to eat to get that increased risk is servings with an S per day. So even if you believe the epidemiologic data, you got to be eating servings of red meat every day. Most people are not. Even red meat eaters might have like a serving a day, or maybe servings a day sometimes, but not on average servings a day. And even then, most of the danger seemed to be coming from processed red meats, things like bacon, salami, sausage, not necessarily from like steak or ground beef, which again is where I think most people are getting their red meat consumption. So if you believe the epidemiologic data, then consuming incredibly high amounts of processed red meat maybe is associated with an increased risk of cancer. I'm skeptical of a lot of that data. I've been actually in conversation with a number of people I respect just the last few days about this. And I think that, in the prospective studies and the things that we try to look at, going forward, there's not a ton of convincing evidence that the increased risk is there and is real. And even when it is, we're not like smoking, when we only rely on epidemiologic data, it's like, it's 20 times, like the relative risk is like 20. With red meat, even at those high levels of intake, it's like 0.2. It's a tiny relative risk increase, or tiny absolute risk increase, over what it is. It's not like the massive increase we see epidemiologically from smoking. So I personally do think that a lot of the concern over red meat is overblown. If you go read that piece, which again I encourage you to do, is the New York Times. I also linked to another great study, which is totally worth looking at. It was from, I think, 2013, where these guys wrote a systematic review. It's spectacular. I mean, it's a classic paper, where they basically gathered all of the studies showing different foods, whether they increased or decreased the risk of cancer. And almost every food you can imagine has been shown in multiple studies to either increase or decrease the risk of getting cancer, which basically means that we're just finding associations which are all washing each other out. And that when you add up all of this together, almost no food is probably that much of a risk or that much of a benefit. Mark Eric Lane asks, what medical question do people ask you most often? It depends. It depends what's in the news. When Ebola's in the news, it's all Ebola all the time. When measles in the news, it's all measles all the time. For a couple weeks, the only question I was getting was, do I really, think pot is better than alcohol? I get a lot of diet questions when people, things like diet are in the news. Probably overall, I think it's questions about diet. I think it's questions about, which diet do I think is best. Most often it's people who have found a diet that they love and they want me to endorse it, or their friends want me to tell them it's all crap, and that it's a myth. Because somebody will get into a paleo diet, or someone will go Atkins, or someone will go Ornish, or someone will go totally this way, that. And so I think that's probably the one that I hear the most, but my answer is almost always the same. It's, does it work for you? Then that's awesome, because whatever works best for you is probably the one that is the one you should do. Danny Minko asks, sensory integration for autism in kids, does it work? Again, what does he mean, does it work? And also, you have to talk about where on the spectrum. Autism is unfortunately these days not a binary, or fortunately, depending on how you feel about it, it's not a binary diagnosis, it's a spectrum. So sensory integration is a new technique that people are using. I wouldn't say it's terribly well studied, but I am all for its study. I'm all for doing research into trying to improve the outcomes for kids and even adults who have autism. And so therefore, trying this, as part of a research study, I think that's great. Paying tons of money for people who don't know what they're really doing, when we don't know if it will work, or forcing it upon, then I get sketchy. Because again, it's always benefits versus harms. And harms here would be mostly, whether it really upsets someone or whether there's a big cost. And since I don't have good answers to those things, I think it's, again, totally fine as part of we're trying to figure out whether it really works and trying to do that looking forward. But it's not something that I'd be writing prescriptions for if a child has autism. And I'm going to take another sip from my mug while the technology catches up for where we are. We could talk more about Hank's haircut. I don't know. I'm trying to think what else has been happening recently that we could talk about. We're still trying to keep news going on Fridays, which has still been good. And we're still working on the every Monday topic. You know what's good? I don't mind hearing suggestions on what people would like us to cover in healthcare triage, especially. Or if there's a study that just came out that you want to hear about and you think we should cover in healthcare triage news, that would be terribly helpful as well. Because I'm always picking studies that I think are of interest, but sometimes my finger might not be on the pulse of what people want to know about. So if there's a study of the week that people want to hear more about or to have us go into in detail, perfectly great thing. Tweet us, tweet the healthcare triage link, tweet me. Those would all be good things to know. Just recently, in fact, just a day or two ago, somebody tweeted at me whether or not we've ever done a healthcare triage on gender discrepancies in how they are paid as physicians, whether women or men are being paid the same in physicians. And while I'd written about that a number of times in the blog, we'd never done it. So we whipped up a script, It's going to be coming up in the future. Not next week, which I think we already have filmed, but probably like the week or two after that. So, asking me if it's something we've covered before or whether it's something you'd like to hear about in the future, then, we'll do it. Last question, are we doing this? Oh, maybe it's not the last question. Here's a question. Is there actually more ADD or ADHD, or is it just more accurately diagnosed? So we're talking about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or attention deficit disorder. As always with these questions, it's a little column A and a little column B. I think that probably there is more, but partially that's because this is one of those things where we alter the diagnosis over time. And so we change what AD or ADHD is, and therefore, different numbers of people fall into it. Plus, we sometimes diagnose kids who really technically aren't ADHD with the thing, with the process, with the condition, because that opens some doors for treatment and therapy sometimes and services that might otherwise not be available. Plus, awareness gets a lot of it done. Teacher awareness especially, you'll see teachers who often will try to self-diagnose kids or diagnose kids and then send them on for further diagnosis, which sometimes is appropriate and sometimes not. And sometimes it is that, there is real awareness and that's causing us to diagnose it better. So, the increasing prevalence or incidence of ADHD is both a good and a bad thing. When we're picking up stuff that's real, it's good. When we're picking up stuff that's not so good. So it's a tougher answer than I wish I could have given you. What are the risks of pregnancy after 35 years old? Well, the risks of pregnancy get higher as women age. I hate to use cutoffs of like 35, like saying like 36 is terrible, 35 is awesome. I know tons of women who are older than 35 who've had successfully awesome pregnancies, and I know women who are younger that have had, unfortunate things happen. The risk of Down syndrome is one thing that is known quite widely that goes up with the age of the mother, whether that's because it's sort of the age of the eggs and the chance that there will be some sort of trisomy anomaly makes that higher. That is a risk that as women age, that it gets higher. Of course, it's a good time to talk about or point out again the fact that there's a difference between relative risk and absolute risk. The absolute risks of pregnancy, at age 35 and above are still low. The vast majority, the vast majority of pregnancies turn out just fine in women over age 35. It's just that the relative number get higher. But, that doesn't mean that you should go out and have risks, or have pregnancies younger just because of those risks, because of course there are other things that can go wrong in both lives and with the pregnancy by having kids too young. So it's something you think about, but it's always weigh the harms and the benefits. And sometimes the benefits to waiting to have children later in life outweigh the potential harms. And sometimes that goes in the opposite direction. The problem is we too often just focus on the potential harms. And that leaves us, panicked about that we should, try to have kids earlier and earlier. So is it easier sometimes when you're earlier? Yes. Are the absolute risks of some things like trisomy or other disorders with the child, or even, disorders with the mother, less as women are younger? Yeah. But again, always weigh the benefits for waiting as well, and they may outweigh them. 2K7 Disturbed, whose Twitter handle I don't understand. 2007, I don't get it. Does the research support fecal transplants for treating obesity? I'm going to say no. I promise you, the first time that there's promising research that we have an easy way to combat obesity, you'll know. It'll be on the front page of every paper. It'll be on Oprah. And it'll be everywhere. No one will hide it, and someone will try to make money off of it. Fecal transplants are one of those things that have been sort of getting, it's the latest sort of, I don't want to say new agey, but the latest sort of bizarre way that people are trying to combat obesity. And no, there are not good studies showing that it's amazingly awesome. If it were, I promise you, I would cover it in Healthcare Triage News, and we would cover it in Healthcare Triage. It is not. And unfortunately, there really are no great miracle cures for obesity, as we've talked about before. A lot of times it's fixing your diet and exercising, and that sucks, and it's hard. Like when we talk about P90X3 and my diet, I don't mean to make it sound like, oh, it's so easy. changing my behavior to force myself to be active and to exercise every day is sometimes hard. We joked around here, and we still are, that, while I'm trying to sort of do calorie restriction and watch my weight, I'm hungry a lot, and that sucks. And sometimes I'll watch Mark eat like delicious looking pretzels, or what would you have that other? Sometimes, out there there'll be a big box of cookies or his delicious Soylent. And I'll be hungry and I'll want to eat it, and I don't, because I have to watch what I'm eating in order to gain weight. It shouldn't be, no one should be under the illusion that, whenever anybody's offering this miracle easy eat whenever anything you want cure, I'm always skeptical. If it was easy, we'd have all done it by now. It doesn't appear to be easy. And if somebody figures that out, again, believe me, we'll be shouting it from the rooftops. But at the moment, there doesn't appear to be one. Last question from Mr. Egenator. Are long-acting contraceptives better than short-acting ones? You guys with your better and your worse. What do you mean by better? So, are they easier to keep on? Sure. Yeah, because it's a long-acting one. You just have it put in and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So, is it better in that sense? Yes. Are they less likely to fail? Yes. Because, again, the biggest reason that contraceptives fail is human error. People forget to take the pill, people forget to use condoms, or they just don't, and that's why that they fail. Are they better in terms of side effects? No, I don't know. Condoms have almost no side effects at all, and the side effect profile of long-acting contraceptives, like Norplant versus the pill, you have to discuss that with your doctor. They may have different. Putting in an IUD can be painful for some women. The actual putting it in and out. I shouldn't say. I was about to say something personal, and I'll cut that off. So it can be. Some women don't enjoy it. The little string that hangs out. Some people don't like that either. And so. Better or worse, you're making a decision about what it does. So the question, if you're saying, are they more likely to prevent you from getting pregnant? Yeah. IUDs are fantastic in that respect, as are the implantable hormone contraceptives. They are much less likely to let you fail and result in a pregnancy. But they cost more, and they can sometimes be painful to put in. And so you weigh that benefit. If you're asking me just generally, do I think that people should consider them more often than they do? Yes, absolutely. I think if you're not looking to get pregnant soon, long-acting contraceptives are much better. And it's interesting to watch as the Affordable Care Act goes into place and more young adults have access to good insurance. We may see more long-acting contraceptives be used, because the major impediment to their being used in the past was it cost you more money, to have that done. And so a lot of people have avoided it. So we'll see that. So thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be posting a link to our next live show later today. You can start to leave questions for next time as soon as we post the link. So, start. We keep track of them. We'll keep on them. I think we're going to try to do this next week, probably in the morning, because we'll be back to a regular shooting schedule. So what did we do last time? 10, 11, 20? 11 or 12. Let's say around 11 or 11-ish. Well, you know what? I'm going to talk to you for a second while I look at my calendar and make sure I'm not promising something that can't actually happen. So you can watch the magic. Oh, can't do that. I got a haircut at 1. Can we do it earlier? Or 12:45. So we'll probably do it earlier in the morning next Wednesday, because I got to be out of here by about 12:30-ish. So maybe we'll shoot for 10 or 10:30. Regardless, now I've babbled on for too long. We will post a link for the time of the show as soon as possible. Tell your friends, tell everyone to watch Healthcare Triage Live. Subscribe to Healthcare Triage if you haven't already. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.